What's kind of happened over time is that what the response has been often is an emergency response. We never really got to making those structural corrections to really make sure that we could have housing security for folks. And so that has just extended for the last 2.5 decades. And over time, the way that we look at it, and dominant culture looks at it, is it has turned into this, kind of behavioral look at personal mistakes or blaming individuals for bad choices, or talking about a lot of stereotyping in terms of who's homeless and who's not homeless, when in fact you can walk down the street or look at anybody in the room, you have no idea of knowing the housing status of any of us sitting here on the panel just by looking at us. You just wouldn't be able to tell. Yet we've kind of grown into that. And so that I think is one of the challenges around really trying to turn it around, so that we're looking at those structural causes of homelessness, looking at the lack of treatment that's available for people who are mentally ill, looking at the lack of access to education to poor folks, to being able to secure more higher wage jobs, to making sure that we have housing as a basic human right in the United States.
So I want to move on to the next question. I'd like to start with JR. What are the specific needs of queer and trans youth on the streets? Do you have something you'd like to add there?
Well, obviously housing.
Housing, obviously.
I don't know, just like resources as well, like different places to go, like how to get involved with like different services that people offer, like help services and schooling, and how to get more involved and connected with that type of thing.
Sure. Lachlan, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. Yeah, I mean, education, housing, food, everything underneath the sun. I mean, groups, community, and that's one of the things is that communities are supposed to bring people together and help each other out. And the one thing that I see lacking down here that used to happen was the thing with what Mitchell used to do, was the drop-in down here. And so the youth that want to stay down here rather than go over to the TL or go up to the Haight, there's actually something within the community. So I definitely think even the drop-in place to go hang out.
I think what youth are really lacking are alternatives and options. I mean, there's certainly an array of services out there, but there's also ways in which, all of these services have certain models that they work on, and there's just not enough models that are working for the youth that are out there. They're getting 86 from these programs, they're getting kicked out with no follow-up on where they're going, and that's why youth are continuously on the streets. Like, they may make it into the program, but they might not stay there long. And if they do stay there long, who says that they're getting the information and the education that they're looking for to make them make enough money to live sustainably in San Francisco, which we all know is hard to do.
I think that's really important what Beck's saying, and I think there needs to be more culturally competent services. And for me, that really comes from within the community. Like, our program was started for and by homeless youth. So it's very important to get their voice and understand their needs and have them providing those services and educating each other. I think what a lot of homeless youth don't have is support, community, and acceptance and love. And that's something that community can really provide to each other if they're empowered and given a space to do it in.
So now that we know what they need, what's actually available? Mike, would you like to start on that?
Well, actually, I've lived in the Castro for over a decade, and I actually don't know what is available here aside from Lyric.
Right.
I can talk about what's available on the Haight, and one of the things I want to let everybody know is, when you see these kids out on the street and so on, you can send them to us, Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic, Homeless Youth Alliance, and so on. We can get them hooked into medical services, case management, housing, and mental health services as well.
There'll be a time for questions in the second hour. Brenda, what's available?
In this area?
Yes.
Besides what's already said.
The what? Yes, speak up.
Besides what's already been said, not a whole lot. There's Castro Mission Health.
So there's Lyric, Castro Mission Health,
Dimensions.
Dimensions, JR?
The Lift Space has a space now at the Castro Country Club that they do on Friday nights.
Okay.
Which is from like 7 to 11.
So that provides that community
Yeah.
support. Okay.
Tuesday nights, there's a youth meal night over at the center that New Leaf and on Tuesday nights over at the center, there's a meal night that New Leaf as well as Lorcan Street does.
Okay. So that meets the the food need? Anybody else?
Only if you're hungry once a week.
Only if you're hungry.
So how are queer and trans youth treated in the service system? What happens if they get kicked out?
So one
Marilyn.
thing, I mean,
Jennifer and then
yeah,
Marilyn.
yeah, just one piece of it is that we did a survey the year before last year, on shelter residents in the San Francisco. So this is single adults, and so you're gonna have some youth that are over the age of 18, but not kids under the age of 18. But what we did is asked a lot of questions around human rights abuses, and one of the categories that came up really strong, specifically was from transgender, who basically were triple. And the startling thing is over half of the people reported some form of abuse in the shelter system overall, but from people who self-identified as transgender, the level of abuse in the shelter system was hugely higher, and I want to say it was twice that much, maybe 2.5 times higher, and so it was very striking.
JR?
I think since like we're talking about like community, like she was just saying, like when a queer youth maybe gets kicked out of one program or something, I think it's slightly a little like better. They can find another place, but like I find like especially if you're talking about like getting help from like older queer people or something, like but like when a trans youth, like older queer people aren't like don't want
Older,
help.
you mean over 18? Over 21?
Older. You know, like-
Older than that.
That's an older person
trying to understand.
Over 30.
Yeah.
Over 30.
So you're saying the community as a whole in
Community as a
Castro
whole.
isn't necessarily
Trans friendly.
trans friendly,
Trans-friendly.
right?
Right.
Right, I was just gonna touch on the same thing. I think that, in my experience from talking with participants at the program, trans youth, and intersex youth and hermaphrodite youth, those who generally blur the gender lines find it much harder to find a safe place to be. They find it really uncomfortable in a lot of these spaces where it's an open room with other folks. You know, they're young, they're just finding out their identity, and this is the reason there's such recidivism in these programs, is because they're not feeling safe in one place, so they leave, they lose their chances at this certain program, and they go to somewhere else, which might not work out either, and then they're kind of left on the streets.
Marilyn? Same?
Yeah.
Brenda?
Yeah.
Really?
The only thing I would add to that is that, you know, the whole getting into a program, then getting kicked out or leaving because it's not safe, it's not just the system. This is what their lives have been like, starting at a very young age. And so it's very, very difficult for these people. The more times they get kicked out, the less welcome they are into a center and so on. More likely it is they're going to be less likely to receive services, ask for help when they need it, and enter programs.
There's people that specializes in post-kicked out population, right? I mean, all of your service agencies have the same feeling.
I mean, I think we're probably the lowest threshold among most service providers. We don't have many rules. And I think that's something that's definitely lacking, and especially within youth programs, they tend to have a lot of rules about drug use and alcohol use, and although I understand why those rules exist, the youth are self-medicating for a reason, and they need to be able to access services no matter where they are in the continuum of their drug or alcohol use.
Any additional thoughts on that?
I think they need a lot more like intensive case management, like a lot more availability to come in, drop in when they need to. And often, like our program, it's just really difficult to just have people come in, you know, and drop in and have to drop everything else. So I definitely agree. I feel that they need like more intensive support somewhere that they can always come in and
Right.
get like, you know, counseling or whatever it is that they need.
What I'm hearing is that's not prevalent.
Right.
Correct.
And there's
Right,
no
I think-
hardcore service in the Castro where youth are welcome every day of the week, where they have that time.
Same.
Yeah, I would say that I think what is majorly lacking is an easy access point,
Yeah.
something that's incredibly accessible for youth to go to, like a one-stop shop where they can find referrals and access to all these different services we're talking about, without having to go all across the city, because as you know, these people are living day-to-day lives. They're like, what am I gonna eat today? where am I gonna sleep tonight? And what they're looking out for most of all is, where am I gonna sleep tonight and how am I gonna stay safe? And there's various ways that they go about housing depending on, you know, their gender identity, whether or not they can pick someone up in the Castro, whether or not they have something to trade for housing. So we have to understand that we need to make it really easy for people to access services.